My name is Leo, and welcome to another reading of the Elder Scrolls. Today we'll be reading King Edward, Chapter 9. Now, before we do start today's reading, in case you're wondering why we are doing a reading today, that's because I've decided that I'm going to do book readings until the 26th of August, which is when we can finally get our teleportation ability for the Mages Guild. I am still playing the game and doing quests, although I think it's still the 24th, 23rd. I got a lot of catching up to do, but I'm just doing Mage's Guild quests, and they're almost all that stupid dragon one, so they're all quests we've done before. So I'm just gonna grind out the quests, and then not for the Mage's Guild, by the way, for the temple. Yeah. No, I'm waiting for the Mages Guild to be able to rank up in the Mages Guild. Yes. That's what we're doing. Yeah. So I'm going to be reading some books until the 26th. Which is really just like 2 days. Well, what's today's date? What is the date today? I don't know. Alright, phone, tell me what day it is. It's the 24th. Okay, thank you. Thank you, phone. Appreciate that. Yeah, okay, so, yeah, because it's 23rd in game, and I'm like, oh god, it's not even today yet. Alright, so we're gonna read this book today, and I guess we'll read another book tomorrow for the 25th, and then the 26th we'll come back to gameplay. Alright? Cool. Yeah, let's get back to the Elder Scrolls reading. King Edward, Chapter 9, Luck. Ooh. Word wrapping at the beginning of the page. That's new. That's weird. Okay, so the beginning is actually Edward. Edward knelt behind Merlin, leaning over his shoulder so that he could see the cards the elf had. Wait, what cards? Wait, what happened in the last episode? It's been a while since we did the last book, so I'm gonna have to look it up again. I don't know. So I feel like we're actually just jumping in to a story here, because in the last episode, I'm not very sure what was going on, but I don't think they were talking anything about cards. So it looks like they're playing a card game. Okay, let's get back to my book. Where's part 9? Where the fuck's part 9 going? There it is. Right. Edward knelt behind Merlin, leaning over his shoulder so that he could see the cards the elf had. He was sitting away from the fire, so it was dark for human eyes, but Merlin was the only one in the group who would allow Edward to see his cards. The other players, Beach, Mirth, and Mats, said Edward brought him bad luck. Merlin said that it was not really a question of luck, which is the title of this episode, but that their hands were reflected in Edward's face for those that had eyes to see such images. Really, like in the eyes, the reflection in the eyes. No, I think it's in the face. It's because I'm white. That's racist. Anyway, right, sorry. It was too dark. Where are we? There's so much word wrap. I'm just gonna read it from the phone. Sure. Just keep an eye on when you're actually supposed to turn the page. Okay. It was too dark for Beach and Mats to see Edward now, and Merlin blocked him from Mats' view. And yet, the pile of coins in front of Merlin had grown smaller since Edward had taken a place behind him. But this time, he had been dealt a good hand. Edward could see that it was Matt's turn. He was, how do you say this word? Cogitating? I don't actually know how to say that word. I'm gonna look it up. Yeah. Yes, indeed it is. Cogitating. Okay, which, oh, you know what you didn't do? You didn't look at the meaning of the word. Which doesn't matter. Thinking deeply. Okay, right. Back to the story. You're shivering, son, Marilyn said. Have you no warmer clothing? We must find something for you. Here, come share my cloak then. You can hold the cards if you like. The wind was chill. There was a bite to it now that they were further north, and the year had grown older. Edward accepted the shelter of Marilyn's arm and warm fur cloak and sat close to his side. I think I'll just play the cards I hold, Matt said at last, and pushed a pile of coins into the pot. Then, with sudden resolve, added a few more. There. Throw the hand down, Edward, we're through. But there aren't many better hands than what we've got, Edward protested. Edward! Marilyn growled. Well, how am I supposed to learn? Matt didn't have to show his cards unless they matched his bet. By watching silently. Oh, very well. No one ever told me that fatherhood came cheaply. He shoved most of his coins into the pot to match Matt's bet, and Edward laid the hand down. Ah, Matt said. You needn't do that, my friend. I'll show the boy my cards for free. You filthy Nord, Marilyn said in disgust. Put down your cards and take my gold. If you can beat my hand, let's see if I'm the one who needs educating on how to play this game. You don't, Matt grinned. Except that you could have accepted my generous offer instead of throwing an insult at me. Matt laid down the perfect hand called the Ladies. Taught like that rates an insult. Matt, that hand is almost worth the viewing price. 5 beautiful ladies. You don't see them together every day. Oh, crap. You started looking at the screen, didn't I? I did, I realized that. Oh, there's word wrapping. You don't see that every day. They're not that fond of one another's company. How'd you know? Edward demanded. Ah, that'd be telling, Merlin grinned. Some things you're supposed to learn for yourself. That's the part of the game. But remember that a good hand's worthless if somebody else holds a better hand. I'm sorry. Edward looked ruefully at the few remaining coins. No matter, it's foolish to play with mats on those nights when the god of luck himself stands on his shoulder, and all I have at mine is a runaway Breton prince who should be in his bed. He'd have had that money off me in the end? Yeah, sure. This way we'll get a better slave. Spoiled sport, Matt grumped. It's not every night Cy visits me and I do enjoy his presence. Cy? I guess that's the god of luck? Sure. He can leave as quickly as he comes. Cy's not someone you want to get over fond of, Matt. Who should know that better than I? Nay, do not apologize. I appreciate your concern of me, my friend. It's not altogether unwarranted, but I am mindful of the temptation. I know how undependable Cy's favor is, and how capricious. I play only among my friends whom I trust. Was it the end? No. No way. There's no way that could be the end. This is somewhat, it's not as long as the last book, but it's still pretty fucking long. I keep forgetting how long these fucking books are. They're so long. Good night then, Merlin and Mirth went off to join those who were already asleep, leaving Mats and Beach and Edward by the fire. The Dark Elves' natural sleep pattern was a period of 5 or 6 hours during the day, and a short nap of 2 or 3 hours after midnight. Now that they were travelling, they were sleeping only at night, which was a difficult adjustment for Mirth and Merlin, who had to use spells to cope with it. Seriously? It's like sleeping pills, but yeah. Edward had slept a bit as soon as they had stopped for the night, while the others prepared supper. Where are we? We're still in the first paragraph. Oh. It's all word wrap though, so I'm sure a lot of it is not even there. I'm not even looking at it because I don't want to lose my place on the phone. In consequence, he was now wide awake. Beach was yawning. Mats seemed to require less sleep than the rest. Tell me about Sai, Mats. I've never heard of him before. I didn't know there was God of Luck. I thought luck just happened. Being as you're Breton, I can understand that Bretons like things explained, clear and reasonable like. In sequence. So one thing follows from another, and you know where you are. Oh, and you know where you are. Most gods are like that. They lay down rules, and if you obey them, and pay homage to the god, why then he or she grants you favor. And the better you know the rules, and the more you worship the god, the higher you rise in his favor. Those rules aren't always easy to keep, and one god's rules may require you to violate another's. But you know where you are. Well, Sai's not like that. He's not a Daedra, but he's got a Daedric side to him for sure. One thing, if you worship him too much, he'll abandon you altogether. They call it Sai's affliction. It's an overwhelming desire for the god's constant presence. My father suffered from it, poor man. Is this basically gambling addiction? Probably. The disease is more than just a desire for the god's presence. The sufferers require continual. I thought they said conjugal. Is that written down there? Yeah, it's in the middle there. It's that word right there. No, it's not conjugal. It's continual proof of the god's favor. So they gamble incessantly, not to win, for all they do with the winnings is keep on gambling until they lose. Then they do what they must to raise a stake so that they can gamble again. Oh, it's a terrible thing, terrible. My father sold me as a slave because of it. Oh, wow, that sucks. Later, he sold my oldest sister. Ugh. Then, he was in debt yet again. He killed himself. In one of his rare lucid moments, where he could see what was happening to him, what he was doing to his family, himself. Of course, I was just a kid when I was sold. I didn't understand. I thought it was because of some fault of mine that I'd been sent away, laziness or stupidity or disobedience, and that if I'd only been a better son, it wouldn't have happened. Where are we now? Might as well start the next one. Who the fuck is calling me on Skype? Okay, I'm back. I don't even know why Skype is anymore on my computer. It's not even my Skype, it's the Wi-Fi Skype. Someone's calling her. Anyway, where was I? I don't know. Shit. Heard about people getting sold? Yes. Do you remember that? Oh yeah. If may have been a bit sad, it wouldn't have happened. That's Ariel's way. It's intended that children should respect... Is that even written down here? Yeah, it's written right here. Oh, okay. Sorry, carry on. That's Ariel's way. It's intended that children should respect their parents and learn from them. Some parents aren't deserving of respect. Well, it was a sickness in him. So my mother says. I didn't know that he should be blamed for it, any more than if he had red plague or leprosy. I believe her, yet sometimes I still feel it was my fault. Well, that was bad luck, you might say. Yeah. But Sai sent me Merlin, and that was a lucky day indeed. What other god would put it into his head to stop one human from beating on another? Any other elf in Tamriel would have turned away in disgust or stopped to watch and laugh at the stupid humans. Two dark elf kids. Two dark elf kids against four grown lords. And for all they knew, I deserved what I was getting. Could have been a thief or a murderer. I suppose I was a thief. I'd stolen myself, so to speak. Wait, are we... Oh, shit. Yeah. Oh, it's fine. You're safe. Yeah, okay. Edward shook his head. Right, so that's where we're up to. Merlin can't say himself why he did it. He says he was spoiling for a fight that day and seeing slave catchers on Morrowind soil did nothing to ease his temper. That's why I say it was Sai. But it was Merlin that listened to the god. Huh? That's why... Wait, is it written on the screen? Yeah, it says... That's why I say it was Sai, but it was Merlin that listened to the god. There's no doubt it's a grand thing to feel Sai's hand on your shoulder. It's like riding the finest horse, like love itself. You're one with the world and everything goes your way. Everything's on your side instead of being the constant struggle that life really is. You don't have to be smart or handsome or kind or witty. Things just go your way. It kind of reminds me of that episode of Red Dwarf where they found out that luck was a virus. They kept injecting themselves with it. Just lucky things happened. Or Hitchhiker's Gone to the Galaxy, the improbability drive. That's slightly different though, but yeah. Anyway, if you do something dumb, it doesn't matter. It'll turn out to be the right thing to have done. Lucky! Some folks do seem to be more lucky, others unlucky. I don't know why. Most everyone feels Sai's presence sometimes, I guess. You have, haven't you? Edward shook his hand. He'd no idea what Matt was talking about. Long ago. Yes. Okay. Well, it's a kind of greed, I guess, that this Sai's affliction. You see, there's only so much luck to spread around. And if a few folks got it all, there'd be none left for the rest. Like tonight, I won that last pot, but the others had to lose it. Everyone can't win with Sai. That's not true with the other gods. Not necessarily. You still don't understand, do you? Would you like to hear a story about Sai? Edward nodded. Mats was a good-natured fellow, but usually quite silent. Edward had thought him rather stupid. Matt's luck at cards seemed to have loosened his tongue, and now Edward saw that he thought a lot more than he talked. Long ago, when people were fewer and wolves were more numerous than now, a young widow named Josiah lived smack in the middle of what is now the province of Skyrim. There was an ordinary, she was an ordinary sort of woman, neither plain nor pretty. She had smooth brown hair, warm brown eyes, a short nose, a full round face, and body to match. She'd been the only child of peasant farmers. Her parents. Hang on, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hang on, where it slammed back against the, slammed back against the, slammed back. I'm looking for the end of this fucking thing, I can't find it. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Great. Slam back against the... Got it. Right. Sorry. Oh shit, where were we? Okay. Yeah, excuse me. Her parents had been carried off by typhoid when she was 17. Shortly afterward, she had married Tom, a strong young woodcutter with a cheerful disposition and a roving eye. He'd gotten her pregnant quickly, then turned his attentions elsewhere. Shortly before the babe was due, he'd been killed by the local goldsmith, who came home unexpectedly, found the handsome woodcutter in bed with his wife, and stuck a knife in his back. Tom's death had occurred on Hearth's Day. The babe, a boy, was born 4 months later during mid-year. 2 neighbor women came to help her birth. Two neighbor women came to help her birth him, and one stayed a few days. After that, she was left to cope with caring for a child and small holding, as best she could. One evening in the next morning star, Josiah went out to the small barn to do the evening chores, leaving the babe asleep in his crib. The wind was howling. She had to clutch her cloak tightly around her. She milked and fed the cow, fed the pigs and chickens. When she left the barn and walked out into the fierce blizzard, the wind had risen so that the barn door was wrenched from her hand and slammed back against the side of the barn. Actually, I'm just going to pause while I look for the next bit. Try to figure that one was actually easy to find. Slammed against the side of the... Oh god, now I don't know where I was. Yeah, the barn door was wrenched from her hand and slammed back against the side of the barn. She couldn't even see the house, which was near the road, and some little distance from the barn. But she set off towards it with confidence. She'd lived here all her life and knew every inch of the ground, although she'd never seen a storm quite this fierce and sudden. Already there were 2 inches of snow beneath her feet. She struggled against the wind for some time, until at last she realized that she must somehow have gone past the house. She turned back and tried to follow her own footprints, reasoning that at least she'd warm herself in the barn before setting out again. But the snow was falling so thickly that her footprints vanished before her eyes, and she was quite lost and cold. Josiah struggled on, hoping to come across something recognizable, a boulder or a tree, or the road, if not house or barn. Her hands and feet were wet and numb. She hadn't dressed heavily, and was now chilled to the bone, with ice forming on her eyebrows and lashes. "Jimmy! Jimmy!" she cried her child's name, hoping against hope that the babe would wake and cry, and that she might follow the sound to him. She stood... Oh wait, I'm gonna find the next bit. Okay. Timmy, blah, 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 blah. She stood and listened, gasping the cold air into her lungs. But there was only the howling of the wind or something more. A grey shape took form in front of her, staring on her with slitted yellow eyes. A great grey wolf. Dire wolf, you might even say. Her heart seemed to stop. Her eyes filled with tears as she thought of her child lying helpless in the house alone, and his mother dead outside. How unlucky! To die so close to shelter. Unlucky. But she had always been unlucky. The unluckiest woman she knew. It might be days before any thought to visit her. She sank down to her knees exhausted. The wolf sat before her, threw back its head and voiced its dreadful howl. It's not very dreadful. No, shut up. I'm not good at doing howling. I'm a cat. I'm good at growling. Gah! Gah! Okay, moving on. Her frozen hands scrabbled in the snow, looking for a stone or stick, anything with which to defend herself against the pack. Oh, wait, there's a pack of wolves there? I thought it was just one wolf. Another dark shadow appeared. From the whirling white snow, she scrambled backwards in panic. This one was also grey, but tall and two-legged, grey cloaked and hooded. Its gloved hand reached for the wolf's head and patted it. Her scream died in her throat. No need to fear, lass. We'll not bring you harm, nay, quite otherwise. Be you the murder of yon child? She nodded dumbly. His voice was deep and kind, clear in the high whistling of the wind, but her eyes went into his dread companion. No need to fear, he repeated. My friend Grellion here will lead us back to safety, unless you indeed do wish to spend the night here. His hands reached for hers and pulled her up, and she leaned on his arm and hobbled alongside him. When at last they reached the door, he said, I stopped here for hoping for shelter from the storm. I hope you don't mind. How could she refuse? Men, too, could be wolves. But if he were, it wasn't likely he'd take no for an answer anyway. Please, come in. I left the kettle on the boil, but I expect it's empty by now, she said inanely. Oh, wait, listen. Oh, no, we're not. I did go in when there was no response to my knock, and found the babe. Hang on, I gotta look up the next part. Okay, anyway. Yes, and I found the babe asleep and alone. Oh. No, I lost my spot. Seriously? There it is. And the kettle boiling away. I took the kettle from the fire, but left the babe be. I knew his mother would not be far, and sent Granny in to find you. Lucky for you. Lucky, because that's the whole point of the story. But then I have always brought luck to those around me. He threw back his hood, and she saw that he was tall and pale, with silver hair and eyes, but a young face. His countenance was grim. I don't know what that right means, but whatever. But the silver eyes were kind, and his mouth gentle. My horse too. Wait, I've forgotten the voice that I was doing for him. It was like I don't know the name of that accent, but it's like a British country accent. My horse too. No, that's an American accent. Damn it, I lost it. There is stop. Stopped here, hoping for shelter. No. Oh wait, whatever. I'm just gonna do a different voice. My horse too will want shelter on this night. Have you a shed to offer him? While he stabled his horse, she changed out of her wet clothing and fixed a bit of supper for them. Soup and bread and cheese and elmurot tea. Elmut tea, actually. As she dished it up, she apologized meekly for the meager fire. Why, 'tis a feast compared to my efforts, he smiled, and fell to hungrily. Grenier lay by the fire, his eyes fixed on his master, who occasionally flung him a morsel. He ate well yesterday, luckily for your chickens, else I'd have to buy one from you. Nay, nay, she protested. I'm deep in your debt, and glad to share anything I have with you. The babe stirred and cried then. She picked him up, changed his wet diaper, and put him to her breast. Where's your husband, lady? She hesitated for a moment. He thought... the thought flashed that she could not tell the stranger how alone and unprotected she was. Then told him the truth. A sad tale truly, he said. But he's left you a handsome child, and you seem quite comfortable here. His eyes went round the humble one-room cottage. Crib and feather bed at one end. At least she's got a feather bed, that's pretty... Isn't feather beds deluxe? I remember I recently watched an episode, I think it was like one of the episodes of season 3 of Game of Thrones, where they're talking about feather beds being, oh, feather beds are really amazing. Whatever. Covered with a quilt of her mother's making, and a stone hearth at the other. Table and chairs made by her father in the middle. A ladder led to the loft where she'd slept as a child. Suddenly, the simple room seemed a palace to her. They were warm and dry and well fed, and indeed, what could be better? Why, you're right, stranger. I am lucky after all. Now, will you tell me something of yourself? I am less fortunate than you in some ways. I am I am a wanderer, and born to wanderers, a tinker by trade. Though I can turn my hand to most things, I have never been married, and have no children, nor have I ever had a home, other than the wagon my horse pulls. I've never stayed long in one place. My parents named me Sigh, but most folks call me Lucky. Lucky is what I will call you then, for you have indeed been lucky for me. He stood and stretched and began clearing the remains of their meal from the table. He poured water from the copper kettle into the basin and washed and dried the dishes, something she had never seen a man do before. After the babe was fed, they played with him on the hearthrug, while he told her of some of the odd and wonderful places and peoples he had met on his journeys. And once again, her life seemed very narrow and dull. After an hour or two, the babe grew tired and cranky, and she took him on her lap and sang to him until he fell asleep. She laid him in his crib and wrapped him warmly in a rabbit fur bunting. Yet we have pleasures. Yet we have pleasures. Oh, there it is. When she went back to the fire, Lucky reached for her hand and held it for a moment, without word. Then they were in one another's arms, kissing hungrily. They shed their clothing and lay together shamelessly, enjoying each other's bodies in the flickering rosy firelight. He loved the roundness of her breasts and thighs, belly and... it's getting hot in here or something? Buttocks. Woo, woo, excuse me, it's getting a bit sweaty. And said she was as juicy as an apple. Oh, God. His bleached, lean, muscular body and silken hair fascinated her as much. She had loved Tom, and had known pleasant moments with him. Nothing like she felt with this stranger. She woke in bed in the morning to the baby's crying as usual. Lucky wasn't there, and she thought he must have been a vivid dream. Then the door opened and shut, and he was striding toward her, fully dressed, and motioning her to stay where she was. He kissed her lips, then brought the babe to her and stood watching as he suckled. What a pity that we remember not the pleasures we once knew. Yet we have pleasures still that we will remember, she said. Good, after another week. Okay. I got the feeling that Lucky's going to be with her, she's going to be happy, and then he's going to disappear, and then she's going to be sad. The moral of the story is, don't count on luck too much. I believe so. We're almost at the end of the story, by the way. Oh, really? Yeah. Yet we have pleasures still that we will remember, she said, and felt her cheeks redden at her boldness. What a wanton he must think of her. Wait, is that supposed to be a quote? Yeah, go back. It's all word rap, so you can't actually say it. Okay. What a wanton he must think of her, he said. He said, and laid his cold hand against her hot cheek. Oh, okay, my app must have not written the word indeed, he said. Now it all makes sense. Okay, so let me do that again, okay? Yet we have pleasures still that we will remember, she said, and felt her cheeks redden at her boldness. What a wanton he must think of her. Indeed, he said, and laid his cold hand against her hot cheek. The storm had stopped during the night, but the snow was deep on the road. It was clear that it would be days before the horse could pull Lucky's small wagon along the road. That wagon was brightly painted with leaves and vines and flowers in red and blue and green and yellow. The wheels were red with yellow spokes and had a canvas on top also painted blue with white fleecy clouds. Joseph loved the wagon, but it sorted oddly with Lucky's quiet grayness. Lucky did small jobs for her, mending tools, hinges, and utensils. He cut more wood for her, saying that if she did not need it this year, there would be another. That's true. He stayed a week, and a thaw came and then a freeze. And the road was rutted, but fit for travel. They looked at one another in the morning light, and he said it couldn't hurt to stay another day, or maybe two. If she was not yet tired of him, she wasn't. After another week, Lucky asked her if she would come with him. After another week, Lucky asked if she would come with him. Her heart leaped at the question, but she looked around the little house where she'd spent all her life, thought of her land and village and her babe, and said, I can't go. I've no desire to travel, and I don't want to bring my baby up as a homeless waif. Pain flashed across Lucky's pale face, but he only nodded, harnessed up his horse, and kissed her goodbye. Tears clouded her eyes and blurred the gay wagon colors. Sun's dawn passed very slowly, with rain and sleet and snow, but nothing like the storm that had brought Lucky to her. Occasionally there was a knock at her door, which started her heart pounding, but it was always just a villager, come to buy the dried herbs she sold. Then, on the first night of first seed, she heard the creak of a wagon and knew. She flew to the door, her face alight, and flung herself into his arms. "I can't stay," he said. "I'm just passing through." And that was all the talking they did for quite a while. There was some sex going on. Spring came, and the crocuses, which is a word that I've read in like kids' books and I don't quite. I guess it's like flower buds or something. Poked their noses up through the snow. Oh god, last page. Oh, okay. Sorry, I just had to check. And I don't need my phone anymore. Great. Lucky spaded up her garden. Curious neighbors came to call, but found no more about him than she knew. She sold them eggs, her chickens were laying very well, the dried herbs, and an elixir she made from her grandmother's recipe, which was sovereign for headache and that word. They hired Lucky for odd jobs, despite their suspicion of him. Lucky continued to come and go, never saying where or when he'd be back, but he seldom stayed away for more than a few days. He spoke no words of love, but loved her furiously. All the same, Josiah's round belly grew rounder, and she weaned Timmy to cow's milk. Lucky's trips became shorter and less frequent. All around the land prospered. Even the oldest could not recall a better harvest. In Hearthfire, Josiah birthed a beautiful baby girl with silver hair, but eyes of cornflower blue. Lucky held his child, and joy radiated from him, so that he seemed to burn with a white fire. Wait, that's the end of the story? Well, what about... Well, what's the next? Oh, wow! The story continues in the next part. Holy shit. Wait, what was the title of this book again? I believe it was called... It was either called Luck or Lucky. It was called Luck. So it's called Luck because it's about... Oh. And then, yeah, and then in part 10... part 10 is titled Josiah and Lucky Part 2. So, that one is a significantly shorter book that we will read tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow to find the stunning conclusion of the Lucky Saga. But for now, my name is Leo, and I will see you next time.